All right, guys. We're going to begin our next unit, which is chapter 11, which, as you can see, there are two main topics in chapter 11. There's rolling motion, and then there's angular momentum. I'd say chapter 11 is one of the beefier chapters of the whole year. I think both of these topics are pretty substantial and not easy. So we have a lot of work to do. We're going to start off by talking about rolling motion today. We're going to at least have two videos on rolling motion at least. And then angular momentum will probably also be at least two videos. So try to break this down into four chunks, and maybe each chunk will be manageable. But this is a difficult unit. We're going to need to combine a lot of information that we've already learned, as you'll see. So let's start with rolling motion. We're going to discuss rolling motion from two perspectives. We're going to discuss it first in this video from the perspective of energy, and then next video we're going to talk about rolling motion from the perspective of forces. So we'll use Newton's laws to analyze the motion of a rolling object next video. But for now, we're going to do the slightly easier thing about thinking of rolling motion from the perspective of energy. Before I even get into energy, though, I just want to note that in this unit, we're going to be thinking specifically about smooth rolling motion. What that means is that as the object rolls, what we're going to imagine is that there's no skidding or slipping between the rolling object and the surface that it's rolling on. We'll bring that up again and again, but we're going to be thinking only about that type of smooth rolling. I want to introduce rolling before we think about energy as a combination in some ways of translation, which we've already learned about. That was like our first several units of the year. Translation, remember, that's just a fancy word meaning linear motion. So when I say translation, think linear. So it's a combination of translation or linear motion and rotation, pure rotation, an object simply rotating about its own axis. And if we combine both of those things, we get rolling motion. That's what rolling is. An object is rolling if it's both rotating and also moving in a linear fashion. So its center of mass is moving, and it also exhibits rotational motion. So the way we might think about this is if I imagined this could be a hoop. Think of it as like maybe a bicycle wheel. If it were translating, imagine if we had a hoop that's just sliding on a frictionless surface. So there's no rotation whatsoever. It's merely sliding. If it were sliding, it would merely, every single point along the hoop would have exactly the same velocity, v, 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 v. In other words, the velocity of every single point on the hoop would be the same as the velocity of the center of mass. So I'll just note that velocity, the velocity of the center of mass, is the same as the velocity for every single point along the hoop because it's not spinning, it's simply sliding. In the case of rotation, we have a very different situation. So if this thing is rotating, so it's spinning, but it isn't actually translating at all, then the center of mass has absolutely no speed whatsoever. But the two, the very top and the very bottom of the hoop are moving because if I'm going to imagine that this thing is rotating in the clockwise direction, that would mean that there would be a velocity here, and there would be a velocity in this direction as well. They would both have velocities v because it's spinning. And that velocity, that linear speed, we could say is equal to the omega, whatever the omega is of this hoop. We could imagine that the hoop is rotating this way, again, with some value omega. So the v there is omega times the radius of the wheel r. V here equals omega r. Now it turns out in order for something to be rolling smoothly, then the velocity of its, if we go to rolling now, the velocity of its center of mass has to be exactly equal to omega r. That's the requirement for smooth rolling motion. So if I then combine these two, so if I note that this right here is equal to v com, and this is also equal to v com, in other words, omega r, maybe I'll write that down here so you weren't confused, v com has to equal omega r. This is a requirement for smooth rolling motion. It's a requirement for smooth rolling motion. If it's not obvious to you why that has to be the case, I think hopefully it will become clearer why that has to be the case as we move through our discussion here. So if I then combine them for all the points, what do I notice for rolling motion? Well, I notice the following. If I combine these two, that means that if I take these two vectors, that means the top part of the wheel, which is now, if we combine these, we're imagining an actual rolling wheel, a rolling hoop. The velocity here, this is equal to twice vcom. Vcom plus vcom equals 2 vcom. Oh, you can't really see that, can you? So 2 times vcom. If I think about the center of the hoop now, I've got vcom plus 0 equals merely vcom. And then maybe most interestingly, if I look at the bottom portion of the wheel, if I combine these two vectors have the same magnitude, but they're opposite in direction. So the velocity here at the very, very bottom, the v is 0. So what we have here is this is how we can combine linear motion or translational motion with rotation to start thinking about the rotation of a rolling object. We see that the very top of the wheel has twice the velocity of the center of mass, and the bottom of the wheel isn't moving. And at first that might seem strange to you to think that the bottom of the wheel isn't moving, but of course it can't be if it's rolling smoothly. If we had motion here, if this part of the wheel were moving, it would be slipping or sliding in some way. And that wouldn't be smooth rolling motion. So to kind of give you an intuition for what that would mean, if you imagine if I'm driving my car, or if I'm pedaling my bike and I hit the brakes really, really hard, the wheel is going to skid, right? That's not smooth rolling motion, that's skidding. And indeed, the bottom of the wheel here wouldn't have 0 velocity. It would be skidding. It would be moving with respect to the ground. It would have relative motion. Or alternatively, you could imagine if you think about the rear wheel of a bike, if you get on your bike and maybe it's sand or there's soft ground and you start pedaling really, really hard, that back wheel might slip as it rolls, as you get moving. And so as that back wheel slips, that's not smooth rolling motion. You're not going to have 0 velocity there. I wanted to show you this. I thought you might be interested in this. This is a high-speed photograph of a rotating wheel. Let's see if I can get this in the picture here. So if we take a look, this is a rolling wheel. So this is a bicycle wheel that's just been set rolling, and a photograph has been taken of the rolling wheel. And what you can see, if you look at the spokes, at the very, very top, the spokes are a blur because they're moving very, very quickly. But as you move vertically downward, the spokes become much, 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 much clearer as you get towards the bottom of the hoop. And at the very bottom of the wheel, it almost looks like, it looks as though that portion of the wheel isn't moving at all, which of course it isn't. If this is rolling smoothly, the point on the top has very great speed, so you can't make out individual spokes. Whereas down here, the spokes are quite clear because they're very, very slowly moving, or maybe not moving at all in the case of the very bottom of the wheel. So that's a very quick introduction to what rolling is all about. But as I mentioned, I wanted the bulk of this video to focus on analyzing rolling motion from the perspective of energy. So we're going to now think about energy as it relates to rolling motion. I'll do that on the back here. So energy and rolling motion. As I mentioned, energy, I think, is the easier way of thinking about rolling motion. I've mentioned this before in our course. In general, I usually say if you can ever analyze a situation from the perspective of energy, you're better off, because very often energy is the simplest way. And we'll see that again in the case of rolling motion. So to think about how we would use energy, I might imagine, let's imagine I've got a ramp, and I have a disk. Maybe we can have this be a solid disk here. And we have this solid disk, and that solid disk is going to roll down the ramp. So the disk is going to roll down the ramp, and we might want to know at the bottom of the ramp how fast is it going. So we might want to know what is the velocity when the disk gets to the bottom. What is v at the bottom right here? We might want to know that. So I might just start by defining, for purposes of energy, we might say that this height here, we might call that height h. We'll say that this disk has a mass m and a radius r. And then what we could do is we could think about, all right, well, initially, if I think about the energy at the very, very start, the disk has gravitational potential energy at the start. I'm assuming it's not moving. Maybe I'll stipulate that v naught is 0. So if v naught is 0, then it has no kinetic energy at the start. The energy initial is all entirely in the form of potential energy. So I'm going to say on the initial side of the ledger, I would say something like U sub g initial. That's all the energy. Well, then when it gets to the bottom, what sort of energy does it have? Well, if it's at the very, very bottom of the ramp, it has no more gravitational potential energy, but it will have kinetic energy. But because it's rolling, it's going to have two types of kinetic energy. It has kinetic energy of translation, the linear kinetic energy, 1/2 mv squared. But it's also, since it's spinning, in addition to translating, it's spinning, therefore it has rotational kinetic energy as well. So on the right-hand side, I have to say kinetic energy of translation final plus kinetic energy of rotation final. Okay, so the left-hand side is the initial, all gravitational potential. The right-hand side is the final. There's no gravitational potential energy at the end because its height is 0. And so we just have these two different types of energy. So this is very similar to the energy conservation we've done previously. The only thing that's different is that we have two different types of kinetic energy that we have to account for, which that's really the only difference. So if we do that now, I might say, if I start with the left-hand side here, the potential energy initial is going to be mg times h, right? That's this h, the height initially, is going to equal the kinetic energy of translation down here, which is a function of this v. So that's 1/2 the mass of the disk times v squared, plus the kinetic energy of rotation. Well, what's our equation for kinetic energy of rotation? It's 1/2 I omega squared. 1/2 I omega squared. All right, let's see if I can simplify this in any way. Well, the first thing I might do is recognize that I can rewrite the moment of inertia of the disk in terms of m and r. I hope you remember what the equation is for a moment of inertia of a disk, but I'll write it out here. It's 1/2 mr squared. Similarly, I can substitute in a linear value for omega. If I remember that v is omega r, then omega is v over r. So omega squared is going to be v squared over r squared. I'm assuming that we remember that v is omega r. And now if I write it this way, I'm going to see that I get lots of cancellations. First of all, these two r squareds are going to cancel. I notice now there's an m in every single term. So I can rewrite this entire expression as gh equals 1/2 v squared plus 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4 v squared. So I get gh equals 1/2 plus 1/4 is 3/4 v squared. Solving for v, remember what we asked for was v. V then is going to be the square root of 4 over 3 times gh. Okay, so that's fairly involved. We had to do some substitutions. We have this new thing with the two terms for kinetic energy, but I don't think that's too hideously difficult. Square root of 4/3 gh. You might ask yourself, how does this result compare to the case where, let's imagine the disk was sliding down a frictionless ramp. Imagine a frictionless ramp and there was no rotation at all. It's just pure translational motion. How does this speed here compare with what we would have gotten in the case of sliding? Well, the only thing that would be different is when we went back to do this calculation, this whole term here would go away. And what we would have ended up with then in that particular case, I'll do this in green so we don't get confused, we would have gotten v equals square root of 2gh. So we notice here that the velocity here, in the case of rolling, is substantially smaller than this case where there's no rolling. This was the case of pure sliding, right? So if it's sliding without friction, you get a greater speed than if it's rolling, which maybe makes sense. It makes sense for two reasons. One, if it's rolling, it's only rolling because there's friction. We'll discuss that later. You need to have friction in order to get that hoop, providing a torque to get that hoop to spin. The other way of thinking about it is just in terms of energy, that what we're saying up here is some of the gravitational potential energy gets turned into translational energy, but some of the gravitational potential energy is going into rotational energy. And so since not all of the gravitational energy is going into the form of translation, it doesn't end up moving as fast at the end. I think that's really all that I have to say right now in terms of energy and rolling motion. It's very similar to the energy conservation calculations we've done in the past. The only difference, again, just to hammer this point home, is that we now have two different types of kinetic energy. Unfortunately, you can't use energy to evaluate every circumstance of an object rolling. Sometimes you need to think about it in terms of a linear acceleration. And to do that, we're going to need to think about forces. So we'll do that in our next video.